Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for making your way back. Apologies for the small break, but it's just to try and claw back a little bit of time. So Sotirios is very kindly talking to us today about AI and infertility, a very merging topic. Um, he is a consultant gynecologist and accredited subspecialist in reproductive medicine and surgery in Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust. He also holds an honorary clinical lectureship with Imperial College London. He has authored over 50 peer-reviewed publications, several book chapters in the field of infertility and IVF, and has also co-developed guidelines on topics such as recurrent miscarriage and congenital uterine anomalies for both the RCOG and ESRA. He has a specialist interest in the application of novel technologies and AI in the field of reproductive health, and has completed an executive program in AI from MIT. So the perfect man for this presentation. So thank you very much again for joining us on this late Friday afternoon.
Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. Can I check, as everyone else, is my presentation visible to everyone, or is it in full view or presenter view? Can you see
I
it?
can see it clearly, yes, thank you.
You can see it clearly. All right, so thanks for the invitation. Short time for me to cover as much as I can, so bear with me this Friday afternoon. These are my disclosures, which don't affect my talk at all. So I'm going to try and talk about the role of AI in fertility, starting off more generally and then zooming in and focusing a bit more on IVF, which follows nicely from the previous talk. This reflects AI very nicely for me. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I do my laundry and dishes. And I think that's a bit how a lot of us feel when it comes to work. There are some aspects in our work that we actually enjoy doing. So the key is, how can we work hand in hand with AI to actually enhance our work and make it more fun? So I often think about why AI has suddenly become so popular. Back in 1996, Garry Kasparov was fighting with Deep Blue, a machine from IBM that could make 100 million moves per second. And he won. And in the repeat match, with 200 million possible moves per second analyzed, he lost. So why has it taken so much time to have AI in our lives more? And the truth is, data, and in particular big data, back in 1996, all patient notes, for example, were handwritten, and now we're moving more towards electronic notes. And this comic picture from Peter Valenzuela, I find, reflects it very nicely. It's not always easy to convert everyone to electronic databases. So these are the managers in an NHS department saying, "I regret to inform you that our EMR system has crashed, so you will need to go back to paper charting." And of course, all the medics are celebrating and they're delighted that they can write on handheld notes. But the truth is, you need the electronic data to apply AI. And AI is a broad term. I won't go through all the details, but it is generally divided in categories such as machine learning, which is what has the biggest application in our field, natural language processing, computer vision, and then robotics and manufacturing optimization. All potentially could be used, but machine learning is the one that probably has the biggest impact at the moment. So what's happening in fertility more generally? Well, femtech is a term that didn't exist before, the rise of a new era. So there are now companies and unicorns in the femtech field, which are driving innovation using data and machine learning. There's even digital contraception, and digital contraception that is actually FDA approved. So here you can see the Natural Cycles app and Clue, which are approved. They either monitor just the cycle or cycle in combination with basal body temperature, and they can give an accuracy in terms of contraceptive accuracy, let's say, above 90% if used optimally, and they have been approved by the US regulator for use. So that says a lot. On the other hand, there's a digital ovulation trackers which are emerging in the market. This one is just an example which uses a wristband which you can wear overnight, and it measures heart rate, it measures respiratory rate, it measures skin perfusion, and it can be used in conjunction with an Apple Watch, for example, and it can give you the timing for ovulation, so couples can try to get pregnant. Not only that, there are some products that give a money back guarantee if you don't get pregnant when you use their products, which I thought was quite risky, but they must know something I don't. How about AI to identify patients with infertility? That's the first thing. We always talk about definitions. When should we investigate? What diagnosis or diagnoses are we likely to reach? So these are some beautiful original papers that came out in other fields, like predicting eating disorders from internet activity, and also from detecting strokes. Now, you can imagine predicting eating disorders from internet activity. If someone is searching about calories and weight loss, etc., the pattern of searching could predict and does predict in studies eating disorders. It's not so much what the content of what you're searching when you're trying to predict impending stroke. It's actually things like spelling mistakes or repetitive Googling of the same thing. So data is showing that from internet searches, you can actually predict diagnoses, which is incredible, but also makes sense. Now, here at Imperial, one of our fellows is Jennifer Barcroft. She's here today with me, along with one of my colleagues, Surgeon Sasso. They are using online search patterns to detect both gynecological cancer and infertility. And this has been Jen's PhD, which she has completed recently. But as you can imagine, if you get a patient's Google search over a significant period of time, based on what they are searching, when you analyze this data, which is huge amounts of data, it is not a surprise that you can make correlations with a diagnosis. Even if you saw one search saying, why am I not getting my period? Or why is sex painful? That in itself could predict PCOS or endometriosis, or I have been trying for 3 years, for example. So you can imagine there's a lot of work to be done on that front, and there's potentially a time in the future where your online browser would be able to tell you, be careful, you are likely to have PCOS, be careful, you're likely to have an infection, or seek fertility advice based on what you're searching. So I work in IVF. So talking more specifically now in terms of AI within the IVF field, and this follows on nicely from the last talk, what is happening in terms of data and AI? Well, long gone are the days where, in terms of outcome prediction, we can tell patients your chance of success is between 27 to 36% if you're within this age bracket. And going back to even 2011, from Scott Nelson and Debbie Lawler, we have these algorithms using traditional or classical statistics, multivariate and univariate regression models, where you can input some information of patients and it can give you the chance of success, which is so incredibly important when you see a patient with infertility. So you can discuss with them what the outlook is if they embark on something like IVF. Now, interestingly, in the last few years, with newer AI models, the predictive capabilities have increased even further. So logistic regression, for example, goes back to the 40s, whereas random forest models go back to the 90s. And these are increasing the prognostic value and the prognostic ability for patients that are embarking on an IVF journey. And there are many papers looking at things beyond just chance of success, risk of miscarriage. This Chinese paper with 40,000 cycles and 64 variables with an accuracy of prediction of over 95%, multiple pregnancy, 33,000 variables, again, booster tree models apply, improvement in predictive power of multiple pregnancy of 146%. And the truth is, I think a lot of us that do IVF, when it comes to single or double embryo transfer, we can't really tell the patient exactly what the risk is. We say, well, the risk is low or probably less than 10%. But with this big data and these models, we can actually give them a more personalized risk rather than just a very generic kind of classification. How about follicle tracking? So as we've seen previously with IVF, we give gonadotropin injections. We try to grow as many follicles as we can, but it involves a lot of effort in terms of scanning and for the patients and for the staff. Now, there are various companies and models that have come about, like Folliscan. Sono AVC is the most well-known one from GE. Folliscan is literally a startup developed just for AI models in IVF. And they use multiple neural networks, and with a sweep, not a 3D sweep, just a 2D scan, it will be able to identify and measure the follicles within a few seconds. So we're trialing that in our unit, and we're presenting it later on in ESHRE. But there are a few of these coming about, and they're very interesting. And I've played with a lot of models, and as they're getting better, you can't fool them anymore. So it won't pick up the vessels, it won't pick up cysts. And it only gets better with the more information you feed it, the more it learns. So it's pretty impressive. How about sperm selection? Well, there's definitely a push towards development for being able to identify even up to a single sperm for ICSI. And that's using data from morphology or motility or labels like sperm DNA integrity, and then feeding them into a model that will be able to say, yeah, that sperm is the one you should use for ICSI. So certainly we should be watching this space. Should there be an AI in team? Well, again, we heard about embryoscope use, so incubators where you can put the embryos in and observe their growth and development with multiple photos. Clearly, this is the perfect environment for AI to come in and analyze all of this data. And it can analyze both the morphology, so the trifectodome in a cell mass, but also the morphokinetics, so how quickly it's developing and at what stage, what milestones have been reached. And there are models out there that will grade embryos based on chances of implantation. And again, these are only getting better. And studies are showing that when you combine the embryologist with the AI models, you can increase the chance of selecting a viable, successful embryo by up to 10%. What I was surprised is that there's an application of AI even on the PGTA front. So when you do biopsying of embryos, I thought and felt that this is going to be purely automated, but there is subjectivity when you look at things like the copy number variation plots. Again, perfect environment for big data and AI to come in. And indeed, there are companies that are applying AI to their standard interpretations and are managing to get a higher euploidy rate, 5 or 10% more embryos being classed as euploid with the added value that AI can give. So, and even in things that we wouldn't expect AI to have an application, it can. Simon Hanasap from Imperial College over here has recently written a review where he's saying every step of IVF could be almost, have AI involvement, from the stimulation, the prevention of premature ovulation, the right trigger, assessment, like we mentioned, the transfer, the timing, the dosage, the duration, the precise drug choice. So of course we have to be careful not to get too excited, but I guess the take-home message from this is that there are snippets within a whole patient path where AI may help humans improve the outlook. So how about, for example, individualizing the stimulation? So the doses, when we give doses of injections to patients for IVF. Well, it's interesting. One of our students, Susanna Golubiewska, looked at how humans decide on the dosing of patients. And as always, humans are very subjective and they have their biases and their opinions. So look at this. Based on whether a patient had previous children or not, uh, a quarter or so of clinicians thought that was critical and would affect what dosing they give. A quarter thought it was important. A quarter thought it was irrelevant, and a quarter thought it was not important at all. And how about this question? I asked Susanna to add this one. Would you change a stimulation protocol that worked previously? So someone had treatment before by a friend or a colleague, it worked, they had a baby, but you think it's the wrong dosing or the wrong medication. Would you do the same or would you change it? Well, 19% of respondents said they would change it because they want to do the right thing. 25% said even though they thought it was wrong, they would keep it. And clearly there's an emotional bias there. Because the reason you would keep it is because you don't want to change it, have a failure, and then be blamed by the patient that you didn't keep the recipe that worked in the first instance. So there's a lot at play, but of course, when you use machine learning and AI, this is something you can communicate to the patient as well and say, look, with this data, this appears to be the optimal regime based on 100,000 data points. We can do the old regime for you protocol, but we can use this one. What do you think? So even the patient feels there's less subjectivity. A bit like if you go somewhere for Christmas and Google Maps tells you to go in a different direction versus what you went a year ago. You're more likely to believe that versus if a friend tells you to go another direction. So the first attempt using classical statistical models was back in 2006 with Francois Olivier. They used over 1,000 women and 15 variables, and 4 of them, FSH, BMI, age, and AFC at the time, no AMH at the time, were found to be predictive. And they tried to make a model to recommend dosing and set up the protocol. Now, interestingly, despite their best efforts, it underprescribed. Less oocytes were retrieved, and there was quite a high cycle cancellation. And this is going back to 2009, and it was clearly never adopted. It took many years, and I think this is with the newer models, probably 2020 or so, with Gerard Lettery and Andrew McDonnell, one of the first publications, again, using the newer machine learning methods. And in this case, they used almost 60,000 data points, trained multiple machine learning methods, and they trained the algorithm to recommend continuing stimulation, cancelling a cycle, or triggering, and also decide on the number of days to follow up. So follow up in 2 or 3 days, for example, follow up tomorrow. Decide even if dose adjustment was necessary. And in this scenario, the algorithm had an accuracy of about 82 to 96% versus 10 board certified reproductive endocrinologists. So, performed almost as a senior clinician. Now, I thought I would share some examples of what is currently available in terms of software. So A-Life is a software company that's out of Silicon Valley, and they've actually gone and developed a product that you can buy. Well, actually, it's pending approval, I think, in the UK, or it may have just been approved, but you could actually, in the States, you can buy it and use it, and it can help you with your cycles. It's not perfect, but it's one of the first, if not the first in the world. So I thought I would share with you what it looks like. A little bit about a background. How was it developed? Well, they started from scratch. Step 1, what they tried to do is find out what predicts cumulative live births. They used 365,000 cycles from SART in the States, and they published, unsurprisingly, that the more eggs you get, the more blastocysts you have, the higher the chance that you'll have a live birth. So I said, okay, step 1, we need to get the most eggs possible. Intuitive, but they saw it in large data sets. They had their process, so all respect to them. Step two, they said, okay, now let's get data from clinics that are actively doing cycles and try and figure out a model or build a model that would be able, based on metrics such as age, BMI, AMH, and AFC, give us the starting dose that we should give them. And I think originally this method of k-nearest neighbors model was even developed for the military, but it tries to select cases that look very similar to an index case and learns from it. And this is exactly what humans do if you think about it. When I review an IVF cycle, I often think, oh, this reminds me of Emily 2 years ago who had this particular pattern, or that was unusual, or this is a very routine case, no surprises there. It matches almost every other case, that we've seen this week. Now, using this model, they were then able to...
5 minutes, please, Sotirios, for me.
No problem at all. Using this model, they were able to then set up the starting dose, and finally, using 30,000 cycles from these 3 sites, they were able to identify, based on what had happened in previous cycles, when would be the ideal timing to do the egg collection, essentially. And that was done using recurrent neural networks. So for the last 5 minutes or 4 minutes, I've got 2 or 3 real life examples. This is a patient with an AFC of 9, a BMI of 31. It's in the States, so it's dollars and nanograms for the AMH. But you can see that the predicted number of eggs are 8.1, whether you give 300, 375, 450, and it shows you the price. So it says you should pick 300 as the starting dose. It also tells you, push 1 more day and you'll get 1 more egg or 2 more eggs. And every day you feed in information, it tells you what it thinks will happen the following day. This is a patient where, as you go up to 300 units, you maximize the number of eggs, but then it plateaus. And again, it will predict that if you trigger on day 8 or 9 or 10, what number of eggs are you likely to get? This is an interesting one. This is a lady where it's predicting, and this is up for debate, and I've mentioned it to the team there, that actually by increasing the dose you get even fewer eggs. The plausibility of this is biologically debatable, but it's interesting that's what the model's saying. But I think the take-home message is less is more sometimes. And they're now developing things like cycle forecast, when in each patient, when are you likely, how long is it likely to take, how much are the follicles going to grow, what is the estradiol level going to be. So the last minute or two, conclusions. I don't think that AI and the robots and everyone, I think, does believe this, are going to make humans redundant, whether it's in the lab, whether it's in the clinical side or elsewhere. Clearly, the best scenario is using all of this power and leveraging all this power to allow better decision making and less errors. And of course, combining the clinical shop floor expertise with big data analysis that isn't possible to do. And of course, talking about friendships between humans and robots. I'm sure a lot of medical students may start to get very high scores in their exams and all ace it, given that there's even papers on multiple countries showing that ChatGPT can pass exams with a very high expert level performance. So with this realistic non-AI generated picture of Hammersmith Hospital in London, which has a sea and beautiful exotic trees, I would like to thank you for your attention. And lovely being with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sotirios. Very good as usual, and quite thought-provoking, and giving some ideas as well. One explanation, as you said about probably putting a little bit more days, reducing the number of eggs. Do you think it could be probably more post-mature follicles, and whether you're missing the eggs?
It's an interesting one because I know when it's been presented at forums like ESHRE, there's been massive debates. Greisinger from Germany was saying this is biologically impossible. It's a model It's a limitation of the model. The receptors would be saturated, whatever dose you give. There's other people that believe that, yeah, it can have adverse effects, like you mentioned, Jay, over maturing the eggs. I think whenever there are patterns such as this picked up in models, you have to find out and dig deep to see what it is. Because if it is biologically correct, that is very interesting in itself. If it turns out that it's kind of white noise, you have to figure out why. So, there'll be an explanation why the model is predicting that. And it might reflect on how we are practicing on a day-to-day basis. So the poor performers, we give them more dosing so that we don't want them to worry that we didn't give them enough, whereas the ones where we think the younger ones might do better, even though they're poor responders, we're happier and confident in a lower dose. There'll be an explanation, but things like this come up all the time in these models. And biology versus data noise is a very interesting one to analyze.
Sure. You always push boundaries, as always, and as I say before as well, you're my guru in terms of putting, the balloon to release some mild adhesions, the minimal adhesions and things, as you have noticed. And for the sake of audience, Sotirios is really an ultrasound expert. Can I just ask one more? Do you think the AI, the role in research? Well, because I do get some emails about application of AI in terms of literature search, in terms of analysis and things. And I don't know what your experience is in the context of fertility research.
Yeah, so there are some platforms where you can actually ask it to do a review. You can ask one is called Consensus, for example. You can Google it. And you can put a question in there, IVF versus ICSI for unexplained infertility, and it will automatically search all the papers, all the main databases, and almost do a little meta-analysis for you and give you the answer with the references and a short summary of each paper. Now, interestingly, a bit like ChatGPT, it starts off, confabulating, and then as it gets better and better and better, it's exponentially improving. Of course, the key here is, where is the fake news and where is there not fake news, because you can't be making clinical decisions if you don't have the confidence. But if I may, a final point from me, Jay, you've been a mentor for me from the scanning point of view. So it's we've got the same passion and love for both scanning, and a lot of that's been instilled from you. And it's been a pleasure joining today. Roger in the morning was one of my registrars when I trained in Sheffield many years ago. So it's on so many levels a real pleasure being with you all today.
Thank you very much for joining. In fact, Roger and I were talking, the last endocrine session, not a month ago, and Roger was really keen to see you. But anyway, thank you again, spending your time on Friday evening, and we'll move on to the next session. Yeah.